Live from Ann Arbor, Michigan, this is Veterans Radio. And now, here's your host, Gary Lilly.
Well, good evening for the second time, and welcome to Veterans Radio. We had the lights out in here. It was a little more comfortable for us, but the board man couldn't see us, so there you go. This evening we've got Ken Rogie.
Hello, how are you doing?
And retired from the Armed Forces Radio Air Force.
That's right.
Ingrid Weber back there keeping things in order, and we have Alan Black on the board, right?
Right.
Did I get that right? Alan Black. Thank you, Alan, for all the good work that you do. This evening's show is going to be pretty fascinating, Ken.
Yep.
We have Dr. Dan Book out and the search for the lost black sheep. But you've got some news items right now.
Yeah, I do. I got a couple of them, actually. The U.S. military has cleared a soldier of unlawfully killing an Iraqi civilian after investigators concluded that Specialist Nathan Lynn had reason to believe the man was carrying a gun when he opened fire. Charges were brought against Lynn last month at a time when several murder investigations into U.S. troops in Iraq have prompted questions about their behavior and complaints from the new Iraqi government. The commander has withdrawn the charges, the military spokesman said on Saturday. Lynn's a 21-year-old Pennsylvania National Guardsman and is accused of voluntary manslaughter and conspiracy to obstruct justice over the death of a suspect in Ramadi on February 15th. At a preliminary hearing on Thursday, the U.S. military headquarters in Baghdad Airport, the chief investigator recommended that the manslaughter charge against Lynn be dismissed on the grounds that Lynn believed the Iraqi was armed and so acted within the rules of engagement in killing him. Evidence now suggests, however, that the Iraqi was unarmed.
Well, that's unfortunate, but those guys have a tough job to do, and you're making split-second decisions in a war zone.
Yeah, and you see somebody moving, and you don't know for sure if he's going to have a weapon, if he's going to take you out or what.
And they're wearing a lot of heavy clothing. I'm talking about the Iraqis, where they can hide weapons.
Sure.
So hard to find fault with our troops in a situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of false charges being brought against them, too. So
there are.
That's something to keep in mind.
And that's why I'm glad to see that one was dismissed, because they investigated and said he had reason to believe he was armed. Yeah. I got another news item here that says 98,000 disabled retirees are due retroactive pay. This is a retired Army sergeant argued for almost 2 years that the Department of Veterans Affairs owed him $8,000. He said the underpayment was as a result of the concurrent receipt of military retirement and VA disability compensation. And the VA and the Department of Defense are looking at it again. They say that they have 20,000 recipients that have back pay coming to them, and another 78,000 are under consideration. So they are taking a look at that
Victory
situation.
for the veterans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good
Absolutely.
Deal. And I believe we're going to go to a break right now, and welcome home. And back at Veterans Radio, and we want to say welcome home to all the troops coming back, Ken.
There's a lot of them coming back.
And rotating in and out. But for those who are coming home, thank you very much for your service. Thank you for protecting our country, and welcome home.
Mm-hmm.
And Ken, you have another news item.
Well, yeah, it is. And it's kind of appropriate because it kind of leads right into the show tonight. The Defense POW Missing Personnel Office announced that 9 service members missing in action from World War II have been identified and are being returned to their families for burial with full military honors. They are First Lieutenant William Hafner of Norfolk, Virginia, Second Lieutenant Arthur Armacost from Cincinnati, Ohio, Lieutenant David Epwright from Warrensburg, Missouri, Lieutenant Charles Fuscht from Reynoldsburg, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Raymond Cisneros of San Antonio, Texas, Tech Sergeant Alfred Hill of Temple, Oklahoma, Tech Sergeant James LaSalles from New York, Staff Sergeant William Cameron from Los Angeles, and Staff Sergeant Wilburn Roselle of Duncan, Oklahoma. They were all members of the 63rd Bomb Squadron of the 43rd Bombardment Group. On November 4th, 1943, Hafner and his crew took off in a B-24 Liberator from New Guinea. The men were on an armed reconnaissance mission over the Bismarck Sea. A few hours into the flight, Hafner sighted a convoy of Japanese ships and was told to shadow the convoy and report back. 4 hours later, the crew radioed from the B-24 that they had made 3 direct hits on the convoy and destroyed the target. That was the last radio contact with the crew. In March of 2002, a team from the Joint POW-MIA Accounting Command was contacted by a local government official through the U.S. Embassy. The team was exploring unrelated World War II aircraft sites in Papua New Guinea. The official turned over aircraft data plates, human remains, and 3 ID tags which had been found at a crash site. The team went into the crash site and in doing excavation, they recovered additional remains and personal effects, including identification tags and bracelets. The remains were submitted to the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory, and specialists used DNA as one of the forensic tools to help identify the remains of these servicemen. Laboratory analysis of dental remains also confirmed their identification.
And Ken, at the laboratory in Hawaii, there are approximately 250 sets of remains that are unidentified right now because they have no DNA comparisons from family members.
Right.
So if anybody out there knows someone who has an MIA in the family, contact the laboratory in Hawaii. I guess you can just start by calling the Army or
just call the DOD.
Call DOD, and ideally they would like a mother, but then how many mothers of World War II guys are left alive? Because some of these remains are World War II, and any family member, and they can compare DNA and make an identification. Hopefully. Well,
they said that the reason they would like the mothers is because it gives them a more accurate reading, right. Because they can't make the mistake with the mother, but with the father, there could be some variations in the DNA.
Okay. Well, that leads us up to our guest for tonight.
Yep.
I am really delighted. Dr. Dan Bucko was a Marine Corps pilot. He's a Texan. He's a holder of a lot of single-engine world records.
180? Wow.
180. He's a retired doctor of chiropractic medicine. He's out of Texas. And Dr. Dan, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a delight to be on the program.
Well, you're a real Texas gentleman. I met you at a Vietnam Veterans of America convention several years ago, bought your book, and was fascinated. You know, the Black Sheep Squadron's always fascinated me, but I was fascinated to learn that you went out looking for someone who disappeared in World War II. Now, finding remains of an aircraft is something remarkable in itself, but going out looking for a specific one, where do you start? Tell us the story about these. Well, let's talk about you first. When did you fly with the Marines?
Well, I was not a Marine aviator. I was a naval aviator.
Okay, sorry.
I was in the Marine Corps at one time, and then I went into the Navy so that I could fly.
Oh, okay.
And then I became a pilot, and airline pilot, and Air Force instructor pilot, and things of that type.
What years did you fly for the military?
1960 and through 67, I believe it was, or 69.
Entirely during that time, or did you take a break in between?
Oh, no, it was in and out.
In and out, okay. Did you fly into any interesting places?
Oh, a couple. We were doing some reconnaissance work out of Agana, Guam. And as a matter of fact, one of your friends from over in Michigan was one of my crewmates, Norm Laura, over in Wayland, Michigan. I just got through visiting with him all last week.
And we're going to have, I've talked to Norm, and we're going to have him on a show because the type of flying that you guys did, early warning stuff and some of the other things that you guys did, pretty fascinating stories. And some of the things, there may not have been a war going on at the time, but that doesn't mean there wasn't any shooting going on some of the places you flew in.
I think the way it's characterized, and properly so, about aviation is that it's thousands and thousands of hours of absolute boredom, punctuated by moments of stark terror. Mm-hmm. And that's about true, particularly when you're flying at night. You're flying over a very deep ocean, a long way from home.
And when I flew to Vietnam on a 4-engine C-118 with leaky engines, the Arabs had to be happy at all the oil that was dripping out of these engines. That's when you realize how big the Pacific Ocean is.
That's true. It's a big place.
Oh, is it ever?
Then you also have to trust your instruments a lot, don't you?
Really qualified instrument pilot fly across the ocean. And of course, you're looking at the stars, the moon, the sun, and you're using anything that you can see for checkpoint navigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so you flew for the military. You flew as an airline pilot. That's something I didn't know. You've done so many things. Tell us about these world records. I didn't realize that there could possibly be 180 of them.
Well, I was a doctor in practice. I owned an airplane, and I decided I want to set a couple of world records, and I began to feel around to see what records were available. And there frankly, are quite a number of records still available that one could set. And even though I set the records at some point, all you have to do is beat it by 10% or something like that. Go 10% farther, 10% higher, or 10% faster, and you can have your own world record.
Okay.
What were some of the records that you did set?
Well, I have an airplane. It's a 7-seater. And I took all the seats out, loaded it up with fuel, a considerable amount of fuel. And as a shakedown cruise, I flew it over to Hawaii, nonstop.
Single engine.
Yes, and of course it has to be nonstop because there's no place to land.
Right.
That reminds me of a joke.
Having completed that little adventure, I decided, well, let's really shake this thing down. And so I loaded it up with fuel for the first time. And they had a 12,000-foot runway out there in Hawaii, and I think I used about 9,000 feet of it. And I don't think I ever got over about 50 feet high for the first 700 miles.
You had a load on then.
I had a load of fuel, yes. And I flew from Honolulu nonstop to Miami, and I was very disappointed in that because actually it was going to go to Virgin Islands, another 1,000 miles. But I got to the vicinity of Miami, and I was a little tired, and the Holiday Inn had already offered me a place to sleep. But I think I'll just take them up on this. It was about a 33-hour flight. Long haul.
I can't believe that you flew nonstop from Hawaii to Miami in a single-engine plane. Was that your longest flight?
That was my longest one, and when you're ready, we'll try it, and I'll show you just what it feels like.
Right.
You sound like Lindbergh. He took almost that long, I think.
About the same hours.
Yeah.
Well, I've would like to hear more about this adventure because I always had the feeling that you were asking me to sizing me up to see if about this thing, that there might be somebody else out there. Tell us about the Lieutenant Waylon Edward Bennett, and from Texarkana, Texas.
Yes, I was practicing in my office, and I had received a certain amount of notoriety in the local newspapers. And one of my patients came to me one day, and he said, "Have you ever heard of a fellow by the name of Boynton?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I know Pappy Boynton very well." He said, "You ever heard of a Corsair?" And I said, "Yes, I know exactly what that is." And, of course, at the time, the Black Sheep Squadron was on television, and a lot of people were becoming familiar with the
Right.
heroic activities of that squadron in World War II. He said, "You ever heard of a place called Espiritu Santo?" And I said, "Yes, flew right over it on the way around the world in my plane." And he began to tell me this story about a fellow from Texarkana who had disappeared on a flight out of Espiritu Santo. He had just been assigned as a replacement pilot to the pilot pool over there. And, as a matter of fact, even more recently than that, he had been assigned as a replacement pilot to Black Sheep Squadron, VMF 214.
What year would that have been, Doctor?
1943.
And the war was at its peak.
It was getting pretty much on the move toward Japan. All of the New Hebrides Islands at the time were the storehouse of mountains of supplies that America, the sleeping giant, had begun to produce and put in storage in that area close to the war front, where it could all be transferred right into a squadron area of activity. And so that's what the New Hebrides Islands were at that time. It was a huge warehouse of unlimited supplies.
Place the New Hebrides for us, will you? Is it out there to the east of Australia? Is that what I...
Between New Caledonia and Fiji, directly north of New Zealand.
Okay, that one I can spot.
It's south and west of the Solomons.
Okay, I'll take your word on it. Now all those islands, I'm familiar with their names, but I could not picture. Well, when I was in Vietnam, I had no idea where I was either. So,
well, that's the way these fellows were. They were out there in the middle of nowhere. They had gone there on a troop transport and wound up in the replacement squadron. And some, based on gunnery records in school, were selected to move into the next squadron who needed replacement pilots due to attrition of fatalities, training crashes, and things like that.
And there were a lot of them.
And there were a lot of those, a large amount of them. Anyway, Mr. Waylon Bennett, a lieutenant from Texarkana, had been assigned the night before to be a replacement pilot in VMF 214. And we thought that was rather remarkable that a hometown boy became a part of that squadron. The very next morning, he went out to test fly his airplane. And due to some accident cause, which we've since determined seems to fit into the category of blackout, he was practicing maneuvers that Boyington wanted all of his pilots to really be able to deal with, and that was the high-speed pullouts from long, prolonged dives. And, of course, that courts the edge of a blackout anyway because there were no pressurized cockpits. There were no G-suits at the time.
Right, and it was after that the military developed the G-suits just because of this type of accidents.
And we lost so many young pilots over in the New Hebrides alone, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Nevertheless, Bennett had been assigned to this squadron, and the next morning he and his wingman were out practicing maneuvers when the wingman said that suddenly the airplane seemed to flutter. And it just rolled over and dove into the jungle, and oddly enough, it did not explode or burn. There was no broken treetops, and therefore they couldn't find him. They sent out search parties, but they didn't know where to. All they knew was 10 to 25 miles north and west of the base, but they never could locate him. The search parties couldn't find him. The aircraft flying in the area could not find him. And so he remained there for about 46 years before we got there. And that's how I got involved in this project. My patient asked me about this, and then he asked me to do some research on behalf of the family. And I began to do the research in dealing with, as you were talking a few moments ago, the POWMIA group out of Hawaii, which is called CILHI, Central Identification Laboratory of the Hawaiian Islands. Now, their area of domain encompasses about one-half of the Earth, all of the oceans, all of the Pacific Oceans, Southeast Asia, Korea. That's a lot of real estate for them to be able to look for and ultimately locate an airplane. And amazingly, they do such a marvelous job.
They're dedicated people.
They are, every one.
And there's a lot of them out there. I mean, there was like 85,000 MIAs from World War II. Is that right? Am I close in that number?
That's close, and there's 10,000 of those in Borneo and New Guinea alone.
Wow.
We came across 35 airplanes, I believe, the remains of 35 airplanes in our searches, and we stopped at the last one.
You stopped with Lieutenant Bennett's.
That's correct.
Now, this story started on December 7th, 1941, with four friends getting together.
Yes, they were sitting on the front porch and listening to the radio, and they heard about this place called Hawaii and the attack on a place called Pearl Harbor and the beginnings of World War II. And they all made their boyhood vows of bravado about, let's go over and pop old Bucky Beaver on the head, and this war will be over in just a little while. We'll take care of all of this.
And they made a promise to each other.
They made a promise, and it is referred to in my book as The Promise.
And your book, incidentally, is Search for the Lost Black Sheep.
That's correct.
By Dan Buchholz. We'll talk later on about how people can find that on the internet or call you and buy it. But it's The Promise.
What was the promise?
That if we go off to war and for some reason we do not come back, please don't leave me over there. Don't forget about me and and leave me over there, wherever there happens to be, in a jungle or a hospital or a prison camp or whatever. Don't forget about me and leave me over there. Bring me home. And that was the promise that they all vowed to do.
And of those 4?
Waylon Bennett was the one to not come back.
And so for all the years, those World War II guys came back, they went on with their lives, and it was something always on their mind that there was a promise out there.
And they were responsible to each other and to the memory of Waylon Bennett to continue in the quest for someone who would replace them due to their age.
And was it one of those 3 that approached you?
It was one of those 3 that approached me, and that was Mr. Bowden.
Did any of them try in the meantime to find Waylon?
Well, oddly enough, Bowden, as an Army medic, was assigned at one transient period of his life. He passed through Vanuatu and the New Hebrides. He passed through that very island, Espiritu Santo. And so he made an attempt to get onto the Marine base and find out a little bit more about this accident. And, of course, he ran across the guards at the front gate, and then he ran across a captain. Made it very clear to him that he could not come back to that base, and no, he could not go into the jungle to search for Waylon Bennett. Number one, because it was a war on, and everybody really needed these important folks who wear targets on their head called medics.
Right.
Number two, if the U.S. Marine Corps could not find Waylon Bennett, they didn't think that one lone Army soldier could.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was discouraged from coming back and persevering in this search or the quest for the promise. But he did try, and he took some notes, and he brought those to me when I first met him, and he discussed this entire event with me. And so I took those notes and began my research from there.
Where did you begin your research? How do you go about? First step one, trying to find a particular person that crashed in a jungle on an island halfway around the world. Where do you go?
First, you got to figure out where it is and how hard is it for you to get there today. Then you must dig through the history of what military installation was there at one time. At the same time, you must have a joint effort going to be designated by the family as their representative. They're designated next of kin.
Because the military will just not allow...
They will not discuss funeral affairs. They will not discuss the privacy of death affairs with anybody other than the family involved. And it takes a congressman or a senator to assist in this matter. However, the folks in Silhigh were the best friends that we came across, far more than gusto and bravado, and far more than threats and intimidation by congressmen and senators. Talking with those folks directly on the phone or going to visit with them directly on the phone will give a wealth of information on what is the protocol. This is the United States Army that we're talking about. They are responsible for a function. It's like a squadron in the Marine Corps or a division in the Army or a squadron in the Air Force. These people have one assigned responsibility, and that's the recovery of remains. Now, recovery is the word that gets far ahead of the issue. First, you got to research, and then you have to search, and then you have to discover, and then you start talking about the recovery. And after that, you can talk about identification.
Well, we've got about a little more than a minute before we go to our first break. So, how did you research it? What did you pick up the phone and you call somebody where?
I picked up the phone and I began calling old friends that I knew of in the military, and I also contacted the folks in Hawaii at Silhigh, and they were a wealth of information.
Was Pappy Boyington still alive at that point?
Unfortunately, Pappy Boyington died a year or two before I got started in this project.
It would have made it a lot easier.
Oh, yes, because I knew him very well.
How did you know Pappy?
He presented me with some of the awards that I have received. I would go to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, at the big air shows up there, and they'd present me with these world records. And one of them was Pappy Boyington, one of my childhood heroes.
Doctor, we're going to take a little bit a break. We're going to get into it a little bit early because at this point, when it's over, we're going to come back to you, and we're going to find out all about this search.
Fine.
Medal of Honor is the highest award for valor in combat given a member of the Armed Forces of the United States. There have been over 3,400 recipients of the nation's highest award. This is one of them. Boatswain's Mate Second Class Owen Hammersberg worked for hours to rescue 2 fellow divers trapped underwater. Details after this. When 2 fellow divers were hopelessly trapped in a cave-in of steel wreckage of an LST sunk in 40 feet of water and 20 feet of mud in Pearl Harbor, Hammersberg unhesitatingly went overboard to effect their rescue despite the certain hazard of additional cave-ins and the risk of fouling his lifeline on jagged pieces of steel embedded in the shifting sand. He reached the first of the trapped men, freed him from the wreckage, and working desperately in pitch-black darkness, finally effected his release from fouled lines, enabling him to reach the surface. Wearied, but undaunted after several hours of arduous labor, Hammersberg continued his struggle to save the second diver. Venturing still farther under the buried hulk, he held tenaciously to his purpose, reaching a place immediately above the other man just as another cave-in occurred. A piece of heavy steel pinned him crosswise over his shipmate in a position that protected the man beneath from further injury, while placing the full brunt of terrific pressure on himself. Although he succumbed in agony 18 hours after he had gone to the aid of his fellow divers, Hammersberg effectively saved the lives of his 2 comrades.
The Medal of Honor series is a production of Veterans Radio.
And we're back with Dr. Dan Bookout, Ken Rogie, and I, and we're talking about the search for the lost black sheep. So, Doctor, you did some research. You found out all that you could. Doctor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I received a designation by the family as their direct representative, and I contacted a senator and a congressman to assist, and they were very helpful. But the biggest asset that I found in my entire search was to make the direct contact with the folks at Silhi, because they know all the historical answers to all the mysteries of the universe.
So, are they like research librarians? I mean, they have all this information at hand, and they can pull out a particular case. Does everybody have a case?
Yes. And now pick an airplane that's missing. They know the history of that airplane. If they don't, they can acquire it in a heartbeat and tell you how many engines, what the tail number was, what the buzz number was on the side of it, how many people were on board, and who those people were by identification number. They can tell you everything. When you walk upon an airplane in the jungle, they already know who was on that last flight. Now all they have to do is locate them.
I had no idea.
They are wonderful research people. They have all of the history of every one of the aircraft that have ever crashed.
So you got all that information, and then what did you do next?
Well, I began to determine, was I fit enough to go off on such a trip?
How old were you?
I was about 45 or 50 at the time, which to me it seemed like a fairly young age, but you know, in reality, that's a kind of a little bit over the hill. But nevertheless, it can be done. It's a doable project for anyone, which is really why I wrote this book in the first place, because so many people insisted that I write that book as a direction manual on how to acquire research information, how to put together a search party, and how to ultimately conduct one of these searches. And so that's why I wrote the book in itself.
Is the military friendly to somebody taking on a project like this?
No.
I didn't think so.
It's not. This is their personal domain.
Right.
And
a lot of damage can be done by the wrong people, correct?
Oh, very easily. You can fall into pitfalls. You can fall into traps that are out there. And certainly they don't want to be associated with anything that might disturb these remains from the way they were 50 years ago when they crashed, because it's very important for them to know the exact position of every bone they recover in the course of identification.
Okay, so you did this research, and then you determined that you were fit enough.
Yes, and I rode my bicycle for miles and miles because I had already determined that I wanted to be a part of the search team. Little did I realize that I was going to be the search team, and if there were going to be anybody else to go, I would have to cajole them and shame them into accompanying me, and I would talk to my very good friends about, I'm going to go do this trip, and they would say, you are? And I said, yeah, I'm going to go do the search for this young man from Texarkana. Would you like to come along? And they said, no, I can't go along, but here's you a handful of money. and buy you a sack full of supplies and go on. And that's the way people do. If they can't go along to accompany you, they'll do everything they can to assist you. And I was absolutely dumbstruck by the response to this. For nobody knew this young man. Nobody even knew his family. They had all died and moved off and things of that nature. But the response was always the same. He's one of our MIAs. He deserves to come home.
And that's the way Americans are, and that's the way the military family is, and that's the respect that people give to those MIAs.
Yes.
But you were writing the book on it. So,
no one else has ever written a book about something like this because no one else has ever done anything.
That's what I'm saying. You were writing the book.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got an airline ticket and you flew to by yourself or with others?
Well, I took my wife and I took another couple with us. And we went over to leave representatives in town, that was our wives, while we went off into the jungles that are inhabited by cannibals.
And that was Espiritu Santo.
Espiritu Santo. Now,
okay.
Of course, the travel posters say that they no longer practice cannibalism as of about 10 years before we arrived. But, I never found a single one of those folks who live back in the jungle that can read those brochures. I'm not really sure they know anything about this the no more cannibalism rule.
There's in business, there's a phrase that I've learned to detest, and that is, by all rights, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, right.
and they probably hand down the recipe by word of mouth, right?
Yes, they do.
So did you pick up a crew over there?
No, I picked up a assistant crew, which was composed of natives, because obviously we went over there with all sorts of Boy Scout pack gear and things of that nature that we thought we might need on the trip. In reality, we needed very little. We bought all manner of food and brought food, MREs by the bag full, all of which we did need because we used those for trading materials. But we managed to get over there, and we made contact with some of the local people who were familiar with some of the chiefs who lived back inland, and we made contact with them. And one of the things that we did that I explained very carefully in the book, one of the very best help assistance that you're going to be able to find when you walk into this strange country, go straight to the biggest church steeple that you can find.
Really?
Because he has lay preachers out in that jungle who can speak the language that you cannot. Mm-hmm. And he can lead you safely directly to the most inland, most difficult chief who doesn't allow anybody into his area. These folks wear bones in their nose and little clothes. These guys throw spears with great accuracy and blowguns and things of this type. This is not a tame jungle.
It's like we see in the old travel or National Geographic programs, and we think that that's a thing of the past, but it's not a thing of the past, right?
It is current. You remember we lost one of the Rockefeller sons over there in that area not too long ago, 20 years ago, and he just vanished and disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to him, but it's the same avenue of approach. So your best bet is to associate yourself with a preacher who can keep you out of trouble and also keep you safe and communicate for you.
And so you were given a guide?
And that lay preacher went with us, speaking the language barrier, and hired the natives that we needed. And we hired natives to carry our duffel bags full of food and bags of rice and things of this type. And these fellows also will pitch the tents. They will make the campsite. They'll build the fires. All you've got to do is just struggle to stay along, carrying your Boy Scout knife and your big canteen.
How far back in did you go? How did you start off with a four-wheeler, then walk? Or?
We went to the end of the road, and then we began the walk from the chief's village. And we walked for days because we were going to multiple airframe sites. But we would spend approximately 3.5 weeks in the jungle, and we would march all day, every day, and we would walk uphill and over dale and down through deep, dark valleys, and after days of marching, come to an airplane, and it would be the wrong one.
Now, who knew where the airplanes were?
The natives know everything about it.
Okay.
In your town, do you know where the intersection between Elm and 14th Street are?
Right.
Yes, and you know how to get there.
Right.
The native could not find his way around in your town. You can't find your way around in his jungle, but he knows where the river passes by the big fallen log that's near the shiny rock. And he knows exactly how to get you there, and he knows where this jumble of stuff is that was made by the American many years ago that fell out of the sky. It means nothing to him. It has the same representation of you going down to the local junkyard looking for something to eat. There's not anything down there to eat, okay. and you know it. That native knows there's nothing for him to eat over at the crash site of that airplane, so he never goes there.
You said you came across these other crash sites. Did you report this to the Seal High?
Every one of them.
And
I had a huge map, and I marked everything as diligently as I could on location, and marked those and the tail number or the what we thought we were seeing in terms of identification, whether it be a buzz number or a tail number, registration number or engine number. But we would not paw around in those crash sites because of an agreement that we made with Seal High, which we refer to as the Seal High Accords. We did not paw around in those wrecks. All we tried to do was to shoot pictures of the wreck, and that would include the tail number of an airplane.
Doctor, we're going to a break right now, and we'll be back, and we're going to be deep in the jungle when we get back.
Fine.
Beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. So said old Ben Franklin. Well, he would be very happy with the Sidetrack Bar and Grill. Located in Ypsilanti's historic depot town, Sidetrack Bar and Grill offers 2 happy hours. That's right, 2. The first one is from 3 to 7 p.m., and the second from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. closing. Happy hours are 16 selections of 25-ounce drafts at a very special price. And, of course, bottled favorites of your lovable suds are also available to you at Sidetrack Bar and Grill. You may also choose from their full-service menu for appetizers, sandwiches, salads, and absolutely the best burgers, period. Deluxe buffet catering for any event is available, from sit-down dinners to theme parties. Sidetrack Bar and Grill does it all. Stop by at 56 East Cross Street or call Sidetrack Bar and Grill at 483-1035 for more details. See ya there.
Talk Radio 1600 WAAM.
And we're with Dr. Dan Book out way deep in the jungles of Espiritu Santo. And Ken's got a question for you, Doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, when you reported these additional aircraft sites to the Seal High, did they go out there and research them, or are they going to, or what?
I'm sure that they were planning to do so as I left. What they recovered, I'm not sure. However, some of the recoveries that I have heard of in the last 10 or 15 years sound very familiar. Mm-hmm. And I think that they have gone out and made the recoveries that were existent at that time.
So you had great disappointment when you got to that one crash site and it was not Lieutenant Bennett.
You did that 33 times.
33 times. What kind of planes were you finding?
Well, we found trainers, like T-6 Texan, and SNB, twin-engine utility aircraft. We found B-25 bombers, found a PBY, patrol boat bomber, with 7 men in it. The B-25 had 7 men in it. And we had a Wildcat, several Corsairs, a number of Corsairs, all through the jungle. They're scattered. One of them was named McMahon. There's a second lieutenant by the name of McMahon, which I have not ever checked out, but I am certain that this Marine second lieutenant named McMahon was the twin brother of McMahon that was on a Johnny Carson show.
Ed McMahon. I didn't realize that he'd had a twin brother or lost a brother.
They were both lieutenants in the South Pacific flying Corsairs, and I believe that this may have been his brother. I'm just not certain.
That's fascinating. I'm hearing that for the first time. But all of those finds that you made were not in one trip.
Oh, no. We went over 8 different times.
Oh, 8-year span.
Oh, yes.
Once a year.
Yes.
Save 30 days each year.
And
This is not something you can take on a lark. Once you get into this, it's like, I suppose, like a narcotic. It's you're stuck with it. You have to
addictive.
face.
You would go up rivers. You would climb cliffs.
Yes.
Tell us a couple of the things that you did. First off, were there snakes back there?
There are snakes, and
yes.
let me tell you that anything that will puncture your skin is poisonous to you because it will infect in that jungle.
Right.
If anybody's been in a jungle before, they know exactly what I'm talking about. From jungle rash to jungle rot, anything that scratches your skin is poisonous. And yes, the snakes are poisonous. They're not venomous. There's a difference.
Okay.
They're not venomous, but they are multiple teeth puncture wounds, and they'll certainly infect before you can get back out of the jungle.
And an infection back in the jungle is not like an infection back here in the city.
No.
There are no 911 calls, and there's no sidewalks, and there's no ambulance. When you get hurt, you got to walk for days to get out of there.
And speaking of walking, at one point in your book, you walked at night by yourself because nobody would go with you. Is that right?
Well, I didn't have anybody with me other than 3 or 4 native boys that I took, and it was a fast in and out trip because we were about to come back home when I heard this story about an airplane. And I couldn't go home and leave that Bennett or whomever it happened to be over there, not even for one more year. I heard about this story. I said, all right, I'm going to pack up, and we're going to go back there, and the best we can do is at night. Everybody else had already gone to the airport and gone down to Australia, and they were waiting for me to arrive there. So I loaded up 3 guys. We went back into the jungle late in the afternoon, walked all night, and which the natives do not do. You really have to talk with them to be able to do that.
They have their own beliefs of what's out there at night, or is it?
And they know what's out there. Okay. Wild cattle, wild dogs. There's a lot out there. It's real stuff.
Did you find the site?
We found the site.
And it was not Lieutenant Bennett.
It was another. It wasn't a dead end, and it wasn't a false claim. It was an airplane, and we found the airplane and got all the identity off that and brought it back. So it was a successful trip.
Good.
And I have no idea who the pilot was.
Now, you ran into some real sleazeballs out there.
There are out there.
And what do?
They will do everything they can to find any airplane, and they'll try to find it before anybody else reports it. And then they would like to be the one to report it. And they would like to report it directly to the family of the victim in that airplane. And they would like to sell those body parts back to the family. Well, of course, that's just that's so despicable. It's beyond comparison to anything that you're aware of here in the States. But these folks will sell these body parts to anybody who wants to buy a skull or a handgun or a dog tag, and thereby removing all opportunity for identification of a body.
Who are these people? Are they American or
no?
Or...
No.
What nationalities are they?
The ones that we encountered were Australian.
Oh. And who would they sell to?
They would sell them to former enemies, and they would sell them to American families that are grieving for the lost loved one who failed to come home.
So that,
and I've heard that they will sell $10,000 to $12,000 worth of body parts, bones, back to a family who will, without any questions, just buy a package of bones and say, "This is my Uncle Tom," and they'll bury him. But you can't do that with full military honors unless you have a full military identification.
Right.
And that's through SILHI. With this current status of the state of art is going to be through mitochondrial DNA identification.
Doctor, we're going to a break right now. We'll be back for our last segment, and you can tell us about the homecoming of Lieutenant Bennett.
Fine, thank you.
And we're back with at Veterans Radio with Dr. Dan Bookout in the search for the lost black sheep. Before we get into the wrap-up, Doctor, this book of yours, how can people find it?
Well, they can contact me. They can either come through the websites, the Internet, or they can contact me directly. My cell phone is 903-824-6707. Just talk to me or leave a message. And my address is 501 Main, Texarkana, Texas, 75501.
We'll get that up on our website.
We can ship a book off to you in the next day or so.
And you say on the website, what is the website?
I think there are several places that it is located.
So just
through
Google search?
No, it's not my website. It's through the veterans groups.
Okay. So I found it on a Google search. And,
oh, is that right?
Right. So there were several sites, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on the last trip, Lieutenant Bennett is found.
Yes, we found two airplanes parallel. One was a twin-engine patrol bomber that was found first, as well as the Corsair that Bennett was in, about a mile and a half away. And both of those were reported to Seal High. Seal High came over and investigated the bigger airplane first, and that attracted all of the attention of these scavengers and kept them occupied. And then a very small portion of the search team was quietly led over into the jungle, where they made the undisturbed recovery of Waylon Bennett's airplane and him there intact.
What kind of condition?
Laying on top of the ground, strangely, after 46 years.
Hey, what was your emotional feeling when you found that Bennett's plane?
That's probably best left to the ages. It was a very solemn place, a very solemn time. Exhilaration doesn't come into it. It's the purest form of respect for another man that I've ever had in my life. Here's a guy that died when I was 3 years old, fighting for something that that as I grew up, I was taught to honor.
A very emotional experience for you.
Oh, extremely so.
Yeah.
And did he have any family left alive?
Yes, I had worked with them directly, his brothers and sisters. As a matter of fact, his twin sister had an irreparable cancer, and she was about to die. And my deal with the Seal High people was that I would never announce a find. That would be their job to do. Mm-hmm. But I violated my word to them, because I went to her on her deathbed and told her that he had been found, he had been recovered by Seal High intact, and that he was being identified and dressed out for his return home as we spoke. And she died a week later, and he was forwarded home on his last set of orders 3 days later.
Hmm. And there was other members of the family there?
Yes, his older brother and all of his three friends, all of his high school graduating class were there. All of the people that from our town who remembered this young man were there, and we had a huge turnout.
And he was buried where?
In Texarkana.
In Texarkana.
At a grave site that had been picked out years before by his family. And the Black Sheep Squadron were off on a training and bombing navigation mission that day. You know, they don't do flyovers anymore. They're prohibited from doing flyovers. But they hit their target with an astounding degree of accuracy that day.
The military will stand by its own.
Yes,
they
sir.
do.
Yes, sir.
I've seen similar type things, and it's pretty heartwarming.
I took some interesting folks to dinner that night.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bet you did. So the wrap up then was for you was it a big emotional letdown?
No, it was an emotional high for me, and it still is today, even as we speak now. Just the idea that one of our American heroes came home that would not have come home, not in this lifetime anyway.
Well, Doctor, you did some things that are remarkable. I remember the story of climbing a cliff. We've got about 1 minute left on that story. Can you tell us that?
Well, we did try to climb up a cliff that was not quite vertical, but it was pretty steep. And it started raining while we were climbing it, and it was all moss-covered. And it's not too long before, in the tropics, before a little shower becomes a blinding rainstorm, and you're hung up on the side of a mountain with no place to go. You can't go up and you can't go down. It's rather difficult to persevere under circumstances like that.
How high were you?
Probably around 1,800 feet at the time.
Oh, my. And there was a plane on top?
Two.
There were two planes up there.
Two planes on top. And we ultimately did get to them and make the recovery.
Wow.
Well, Doctor, this has been a fascinating story. I'd like to have you back on sometime to talk about your other career with your friend from Michigan.
Anytime.
And I have the utmost respect for you for taking this project on. I don't know many people that would do that.
Well, certainly it was not a one-man show. There were a lot of people involved, including Seal High and others who supported our project.
And again, they can get a hold of you on your cell phone. And
Yes.
that telephone number just slipped out of my fingers. It is 903.
824-6707.
And ask for Dr. Dan Bookout and tell him you want his book. It's
Yes,
a
and
fascinating book.
I'll send it off.
It's a fascinating book. Dr. Dan, thank you so much for being with us, and God bless you.
You're very welcome, and thank you very much for the work you're doing.
It's our honor. It's our honor to have people like you on. And we're going to be wrapping up right now. We want to thank all of our sponsors.
Well, I'll do that, Gary.
You'll do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we got about a minute before we get out of it.
And what's our show for next week?
Our show next week is an interview with an author for I can't remember the name of the book right now.
You remember the subject?
No.
Okay.
Dale's handling that one.
Tune in next week.
We'll find out next week when Dale comes in.
And the mystery show.
We want to thank our sponsors tonight, Gary Lilly and Associates, Schrader Yacht Sales in New Jersey, Sidetrack Bar and Grill, and Legal Help for Veterans.
And you are dismissed.